The thunder rolled across the Montana plains like God's own fury, as Olivia Lancaster gripped the edge of her seat, watching water pour down the stagecoach windows in sheets so thick she could barely see beyond the glass. She had been traveling from St. Louis to meet her aunt in Helena, a journey that should have taken 2 weeks but had stretched into 3 because of mechanical delays, a sick driver, and now this storm that seemed determined to drown the entire territory. The coach lurched violently to one side, throwing her against the hard wooden wall, and she heard the driver shouting something unintelligible over the roar of wind and rain. Then came a crack like a rifle shot, the sickening sensation of falling, and everything went sideways as the stagecoach tilted and crashed into the mud. Olivia scrambled out through the door that now faced skyward, her traveling dress immediately soaked through as rain hammered down on her. The driver was already unhitching the terrified horses, his face grim in the flashes of lightning. "Wheels broke clean through," he shouted over the storm. "Can't fix it in this weather. Town's about 8 miles back, and I need to get these horses to shelter before they bolt." "You'll have to wait here. Wait here." Olivia's voice cracked with disbelief. "In this storm, ain't got a choice, miss. Coach is too heavy to move without the wheel, and I can't leave the horses. I'll send help soon as I get back to Wallace." He was already mounting one of the horses, gathering the reins of the others. "Please don't leave me here alone," she called out, but her words were lost in another crack of thunder. The driver turned the horses back the way they had come, and within moments, he disappeared into the curtain of rain, leaving Olivia standing beside the overturned stagecoach in the middle of the Montana wilderness, with nothing but the clothes on her back and the small bag she had managed to grab before he rode away. She climbed back into the tilted coach, trying to find shelter from the rain, but water poured through a dozen gaps in the old wood. Her teeth chattered as she huddled in the driest corner she could find, wrapping her arms around herself. The temperature had dropped with the storm, and her wet clothes clung to her skin like ice. Hours passed, or maybe it was only minutes. Time seemed to lose all meaning in the darkness and cold and relentless pounding of rain. When she heard the horse approaching, Olivia thought she might be hallucinating. But then a voice called out, deep and steady despite the storm. "Anyone here? Hello?" She pushed the door open and looked up into the rain. A man sat astride a massive bay horse, his hat pulled low against the weather, a long canvas duster coat streaming with water. Lightning flashed, illuminating a face all hard angles and weathered bronze, with eyes that caught the light like chips of flint. "Thank God," Olivia gasped. "The wheel broke and the driver left me. I thought no one would come." The man swung down from his horse with easy grace, landing in the mud with a splash. Up close, she could see he was perhaps 28 or 30, with several days of dark stubble on his jaw and rain dripping from the brim of his hat. "You're freezing," he said, and there was something in his voice that made it sound like a promise that he would fix it. "My ranch is about 3 miles north. Can you ride? I can try." Olivia's legs shook as she climbed out of the coach, and she would have fallen if the man hadn't caught her elbow. His hand was warm even through the wet fabric of her sleeve. "Name's Zachary Zimmerman," he said, pulling her toward his horse. "Most folks call me Zach. Hold tight to me and don't let go no matter what. This storm's only getting worse." He mounted first, then reached down and pulled her up behind him with surprising strength. Olivia wrapped her arms around his waist, feeling the solid muscle beneath the wet coat, and pressed her face against his back as the horse started moving. The ride felt endless. Rain lashed them from all sides, and several times the horse stumbled on the muddy ground, but Zachary kept the animal steady with quiet words and gentle hands on the reins. Olivia clung to him, too cold and exhausted to feel embarrassed about holding a strange man so intimately. His warmth was the only thing keeping her from completely giving in to the shivers racking her body. When they finally reached the ranch house, it materialized out of the darkness like a miracle, solid wood and stone with warm light glowing in the windows. Zachary dismounted and lifted her down, his hands spanning her waist. "Can you walk?" "I think so." But her legs buckled the moment they took her weight, and he caught her again, this time sweeping her up into his arms as if she weighed nothing at all. "Inside first, then I'll tend the horse," he said, carrying her up the porch steps and kicking the door open. The warmth hit Olivia like a physical thing, so intense after the cold that it almost hurt. Zachary set her down on a chair near the stone fireplace where flames crackled cheerfully, then disappeared back into the storm. She sat trembling, staring at the fire, her mind still struggling to catch up with everything that had happened. He returned a few minutes later, his coat and hat dripping puddles onto the floor. "Horse is in the barn. Now let's get you out of those wet clothes before you catch your death." He was already moving to a chest in the corner, pulling out what looked like a man's flannel shirt and a pair of wool trousers. "These will be too big, but they're dry. There's a screen in the corner you can change behind." Olivia took the clothes with numb fingers and stumbled behind the privacy screen he indicated. Her hands shook so badly she could barely work the buttons of her dress, but she finally managed to peel the sodden fabric away from her skin. Her undergarments were just as wet, and after a moment's hesitation, she removed those too, wrapping herself in a blanket she found draped over the screen before pulling on the oversized shirt and trousers. The wool was soft and warm and smelled faintly of wood smoke, and something masculine that made her stomach flutter in a way she tried not to examine too closely. When she emerged, Zachary had changed as well, trading his wet clothes for dry ones similar to what he had given her. He looked up from where he was pouring coffee from a pot on the stove. "Better, much, thank you." Olivia moved closer to the fire, accepting the cup he handed her. The coffee was strong and hot and exactly what she needed. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't come along." "Wasn't coincidence." Zachary settled into a chair across from her, his own cup cradled in his large hands. "Was heading back from Wallace when I passed your driver racing back to town with those horses. He told me about you. Figured I'd come make sure you were all right. The driver sent you." Relief washed through her. At least the man hadn't completely abandoned her. "Said he'd send someone proper in the morning when the storm clears, but I wasn't about to leave a lady stranded all night in this weather." Lightning flashed outside the windows, followed immediately by thunder that shook the whole house. Zachary glanced toward the door, his expression thoughtful. "Every storm leads somewhere. My mother used to say that. She meant that even the worst times take you to where you need to be." Olivia studied him over the rim of her cup. In the firelight, with his dark hair drying into waves and those unusual light eyes catching the flames, Zachary Zimmerman was quite possibly the most handsome man she had ever seen. More than that, there was something solid about him, something that made her feel safe despite being alone with a stranger in the middle of nowhere. That's a beautiful sentiment. She was a beautiful woman. A shadow passed across his face. "Lost her 6 years back to fever. My father followed her the next winter. Heart just gave out. Doctors said it was natural, but I think he died of missing her. I'm so sorry." Olivia set down her cup and leaned forward. "You run this ranch alone." "Got a couple hands who help with the cattle, but they've got their own places closer to town. During roundup and branding season, they're here most days, but otherwise it's just me." He stood and moved to the stove, pulling out a covered pot. "You hungry? Got some stew left from supper." Her stomach answered before she could, growling loudly in the quiet room. Zachary laughed, a warm sound that transformed his serious face. "I'll take that as a yes." They ate at the rough-hewn table near the fire, and Olivia found herself relaxing despite the strangeness of the situation. Zachary asked about her journey, and she told him about leaving St. Louis after her father's death 6 months earlier, about the aunt in Helena who had offered her a home, about the series of mishaps that had delayed her arrival. He listened with genuine interest, asking questions that showed he was truly paying attention, and when it was his turn to talk, he told her about growing up on this ranch, about learning to rope and ride before he could properly walk, about the challenges of keeping a cattle operation running with beef prices dropping, and the winter of 1886 still fresh in everyone's memory. "Lost half my herd that winter," he said, staring into his coffee. "Worst cold anyone had ever seen. Cattle froze standing up. Thought I might lose the ranch entirely, but we scraped through. Been building back up since then, slow and steady." "It must be lonely," Olivia said softly. "Out here by yourself." Zachary met her eyes across the table and something passed between them, a spark of recognition that made her breath catch. "Sometimes," he admitted, "but I've got the land and the animals and the work. That's enough most days." The storm raged on outside, but inside the ranch house, warmth and comfort wrapped around them like a cocoon. Eventually, Zachary insisted she take his bed while he would sleep on the floor near the fire. Olivia protested, but he was immovable on the subject, and she was too exhausted to argue properly. The bedroom was simple but clean, with a large bed covered in quilts that smelled like sunshine and fresh air. She crawled under them and was asleep almost before her head touched the pillow. She woke to sunlight streaming through the window and the smell of bacon frying. For a moment, she couldn't remember where she was, but then it all came rushing back. The storm, the broken stagecoach, Zachary appearing out of the darkness like something from a story. She dressed quickly in her own clothes, which someone had hung near the fire to dry, though they were still slightly damp and terribly wrinkled. Zachary stood at the stove, flipping bacon in a cast-iron skillet. He looked different in the daylight, younger somehow, with his hair combed back and his face clean-shaven. He turned when he heard her footsteps and smiled. "Morning. Hope you slept well. Better than I have in weeks." Olivia moved to help, and together they prepared breakfast. Bacon and eggs and thick slices of bread toasted on the stove. They ate watching the morning light paint the mountains in shades of gold and purple, and Olivia felt a strange reluctance at the thought of leaving this place. "I should probably get you back to Wallace," Zachary said, echoing her thoughts. "Your aunt will be worried." "I suppose so." Olivia stood and began clearing the dishes, "though I hate to impose on you further." "No imposition." He was already reaching for his hat. "Besides, I need to pick up supplies anyway. The ride back will give us a chance to see if they've got your stagecoach fixed yet." The journey to Wallace took just over an hour on horseback, with Olivia riding behind Zachary again, though this time the sky was clear and blue. The storm nothing but muddy puddles and scattered debris to show it had ever existed. They talked the whole way, conversation flowing as easily as if they had known each other for years rather than hours. Olivia found herself telling him things she had never told anyone, about her dreams of teaching school, about the books she loved, about how strange it felt to be starting a new life at 22 years old. Wallace, Idaho, was a small mining town nestled in the mountains, its streets still muddy from the storm. Zachary guided his horse to the livery stable where the stagecoach had been taken. The driver was there, supervising repairs, and he looked relieved when he saw Olivia. "Miss Lancaster, thank the Lord." I was worried sick all night, but Zimmerman here said he'd fetch you, and I knew if anyone could get through that storm, it was him." The driver doffed his hat. "Wheels nearly fixed. We should be able to head out tomorrow morning if the weather holds." Olivia's heart sank at the thought of leaving tomorrow, which was ridiculous. She had an aunt waiting for her in Helena, a new life to begin. But something about this place, about the man standing quietly beside her, made her want to stay. Zachary must have sensed her hesitation because he said, "I need to get those supplies and see the bank about some business. Why don't you come along? Can show you the town, such as it is." They spent the afternoon walking Wallace's streets, Zachary pointing out the general store and the church and the small schoolhouse where a teacher named Mrs. Patterson had taught for nearly 20 years. At the general store, the proprietor's wife insisted on serving them coffee and fresh ginger cookies, while Zachary placed his order for flour and sugar and other staples. "Don't often see Zach with company," the woman said to Olivia with a knowing smile. "He's a good man, best in the territory if you ask me. Works harder than any 3 men combined." Zachary's ears turned red, and Olivia found it endearing, this glimpse of shyness in someone who seemed so confident otherwise. They left the store with his supplies and walked toward the edge of town, where the buildings gave way to open grassland and distant mountains. "It really is beautiful here," Olivia said, staring at the view. "I never imagined the West would be like this. It has its moments." Zachary stood close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. "Harsh too, though. Winters are brutal, and the summers can be so dry everything turns to dust. But there's something about this land that gets into your blood. Once you've lived here, nowhere else quite measures up." Olivia turned to look at him. "Is that why you stayed? Even after your parents died?" "Partly. Also because this ranch is everything they worked for. Selling it would feel like losing them all over again." He met her eyes, and that spark was there again, stronger now in the full light of day. "But it's more than obligation. I love this place. The way the sun rises over those mountains, the sound of wind through the grass, the satisfaction of working the land and seeing the results. It's a good life, even if it is lonely sometimes." "You should marry," Olivia said, then immediately wished she could take the words back. "I'm sorry, that was terribly forward of me." But Zachary just laughed. "You're not wrong. I've thought about it plenty. Problem is, there aren't many unmarried women out here, and the ones that are, well." He shrugged. "Haven't met anyone who made me want to change my bachelor ways. Until recently, anyway." The way he was looking at her made Olivia's pulse race. She knew she should step back, remind herself that she had only met this man yesterday, that she was on her way to Helena to start a new life. But all those practical thoughts seemed to evaporate under the intensity of his gaze. "Olivia." He said her name like it was something precious. "I know this is going to sound crazy. We've only just met, and you've got plans waiting in Helena, but I can't let you get on that stagecoach tomorrow without telling you how I feel. Zachary." Her voice came out as barely more than a whisper. "From the moment I saw you standing in that storm, something shifted in me. And spending these hours with you, talking and laughing and just being together, it's made me realize what I've been missing all these years." He took her hands in his calloused fingers warm and gentle. "I'm not a man who believes in love at first sight, always thought that was something made up for dime novels. But this feeling, whatever it is, it's real and it's powerful, and I don't want to let it go without a fight." Tears pricked Olivia's eyes. "I feel it too. I've been trying to tell myself I'm being foolish, that you can't possibly know someone well enough to care about them after one day. But my heart doesn't seem to care about logic." "Then stay." He squeezed her hands. "Not forever, not if you don't want to, but stay a while longer. Give this thing between us a chance to grow. Let me court you properly. What about my aunt? She's expecting me. We can send her a telegram, explain the situation. If she's a reasonable woman, she'll understand." Zachary pulled her closer. "I'm not asking you to give up anything. If after a few weeks you decide this isn't what you want, I'll put you on that stagecoach myself and wish you well. But if you leave tomorrow, we'll never know what might have been." Olivia looked into his eyes and saw sincerity there, along with hope and vulnerability that touched something deep inside her. Her whole life, she had been practical, sensible, doing what was expected. But maybe that storm had brought her here for a reason. Maybe Zachary's mother had been right about storms leading somewhere. "All right," she said. "I'll stay." The smile that broke across Zachary's face was like sunrise. He pulled her into his arms, holding her close, and Olivia rested her head against his chest, hearing the steady beat of his heart. Around them, Wallace continued its daily business, but in that moment, they might have been the only two people in the world. They sent the telegram to Olivia's aunt that afternoon, explaining that she had been offered temporary employment as a teacher in Wallace and would arrive in Helena once the position ended. It wasn't entirely a lie. Mrs. Patterson at the school was elderly and had mentioned to Zachary just last week that she could use help with the younger students. When they approached her with the idea, she was delighted. "An educated young woman is exactly what this town needs," she declared, clasping Olivia's hands in her papery ones. "You can start Monday if you're willing." Zachary arranged for Olivia to board with the widow Harriet Matthews, who ran a respectable boarding house near the church. Mrs. Matthews was a round, cheerful woman in her 50s who took one look at Olivia and Zachary together and gave a knowing nod. "I remember when my William looked at me that way," she said, showing Olivia to a small but clean room on the second floor. 32 years we had before the lung fever took him. Best years of my life. You hold on to that one, dear. Good men are rare as hen's teeth out here." The next few weeks passed in a blur of happiness. Olivia threw herself into teaching, working with a dozen children ranging from 5 to 14 years old. She loved the work, loved seeing their faces light up when they mastered a new skill, loved the challenge of reaching each unique mind. And every evening, Zachary would ride into town, and they would walk together or sit on Mrs. Matthews's porch, talking until the stars came out. He courted her with old-fashioned gentleness, bringing her wildflowers picked from the meadows near his ranch, sharing his lunch when he knew she had forgotten to eat, listening to her stories about her students with genuine interest. On Sundays, he would drive her out to the ranch in his wagon, and they would spend the day together, Olivia learning to cook on his big stove while he caught up on repairs and paperwork. "You have a gift with those children," he told her one Sunday afternoon as they sat on his porch watching the sunset. "Mrs. Patterson says she's never seen them so engaged with their lessons." Olivia leaned against his shoulder, comfortable with this casual intimacy they had developed. "I love it. I never thought I would enjoy teaching this much, but it feels right somehow. Everything about this feels right." Zachary turned to cup her face in his hand. "Olivia, I need to tell you something." Her heart stuttered at the seriousness in his voice. "What is it?" "I'm falling in love with you." "No, that's not quite true. I've already fallen. You're the first thing I think about when I wake up and the last thing on my mind before I sleep. When you're not with me, I count the hours until I can see you again. You've brought light and joy into my life in a way I didn't know was possible." His thumb stroked her cheek. "I know it's only been a few weeks, but out here we don't waste time on pretense. Life's too uncertain for that. So I'm telling you straight. I love you, Olivia Lancaster, and I want you to be my wife." Tears spilled down Olivia's cheeks. "I love you too." So much it scares me sometimes. I feel like I'm in a dream and I'm afraid I'll wake up. Not a dream. He kissed her then, soft and sweet, his lips warm against hers. Say you'll marry me. Say you'll stay here and build a life with me. I can't promise you luxury or an easy time, but I can promise you'll never doubt how much you're loved. Yes. Olivia kissed him back, pouring all her feelings into it. Yes, I'll marry you. They were wed 3 weeks later in the small church in Wallace, with Mrs. Matthews and Mrs. Patterson and half the town in attendance. Olivia wore a simple blue dress that Mrs. Matthews had helped her sew, and Zachary wore a new suit that made him look impossibly handsome. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Zachary kissed her with such tenderness that Olivia felt her heart might burst from happiness. The reception was held at the town hall, with music and dancing and more food than Olivia had seen since leaving St. Louis. People kept coming up to congratulate them, to tell Zachary how lucky he was, to welcome Olivia to the community. She felt embraced by these people in a way she had never experienced in the city, where neighbors often lived side by side for years without really knowing each other. As the evening wore on, Zachary pulled her aside. Ready to go home, Mrs. Zimmerman? The name sent a thrill through her. Home, that sounds perfect. They rode out to the ranch under a sky full of stars, Olivia sitting in front of Zachary on his horse this time, his arms around her waist. The night was cool but not cold, and the air smelled of pine and sage. When they reached the ranch house, Zachary carried her over the threshold, setting her down gently in the middle of the room she had first seen that stormy night 2 months ago. I have something for you. He led her to the bedroom, where a beautiful quilt lay across the bed, its pattern made up of dozens of colorful squares stitched together with obvious care. My mother made this for me when I was young. She said it was meant for the bed I would share with my wife someday. I'd like you to have it. Olivia touched the soft fabric, thinking of the woman she had never met who had believed in storms leading somewhere. Thank you. I'll treasure it always. Their wedding night was everything Olivia had hoped for, tender and passionate and perfect. Zachary was gentle with her inexperience, patient and loving, and when they finally lay tangled together in the darkness, Olivia felt a completeness she had never imagined possible. Life as a ranch wife was harder than Olivia had anticipated, but also more rewarding. She continued teaching during the school months, rising before dawn to help Zachary with the morning chores before riding into town. In the summers, she worked alongside him, learning to rope and brand cattle, to mend fences and doctor sick animals. Her hands, once soft and pale, became calloused and brown from the sun. Her body grew strong from the physical labor, but it was a good life, full of simple pleasures and deep satisfaction. They worked hard, but they also laughed often, and every night they fell into bed together, tired and content. Zachary proved to be everything Olivia had hoped for in a husband, supportive and kind and endlessly patient with her, as she learned the ways of ranching. Their first winter together was harsh, with snow piling up so high they were sometimes snowed in for days at a time. But those days became precious memories. Reading aloud to each other by the fire, making love in the middle of the afternoon, talking about their dreams for the future. Zachary wanted to expand the ranch, buy more land to the north, where good grazing waited. Olivia wanted to start a library in Wallace to bring more books to the children and adults who had so few. We'll do both, Zachary promised, holding her close on a particularly cold January night. Whatever you want, I'll find a way to make it happen. Spring came late but beautiful, the meadows exploding with wildflowers. Olivia realized she had missed her monthly courses twice and went to see the doctor in Wallace. He confirmed what she had suspected. She was pregnant, due sometime in late autumn. Zachary's reaction when she told him was everything she could have wanted. He swept her up in his arms, spinning her around despite her laughing protests, his face alight with joy. "A baby! We're going to have a baby! Are you happy?" Olivia asked, though his expression made the question unnecessary. Happy doesn't begin to cover it. He set her down carefully, his hand moving to rest on her still flat stomach. "You've given me everything, Olivia. A home that feels alive again, love like I never dreamed of, and now a child. I'm the luckiest man in Montana." The pregnancy was not easy. Olivia suffered terrible morning sickness that lasted well into the afternoon, and the summer heat made her feel faint and dizzy. But Zachary was endlessly supportive, taking over her morning chores so she could rest, bringing her cold water from the well, sitting with her on the porch during the worst of the heat. Mrs. Matthews and Mrs. Patterson took turns checking on her, bringing food and advice and stories about their own pregnancies. As autumn painted the mountains gold and red, Olivia's belly swelled, and she had to give up teaching for the season. She spent her days preparing for the baby, sewing tiny clothes and knitting blankets, while Zachary built a cradle from golden oak, carving flowers into the headboard with painstaking care. "My father made my cradle," he told her, running his hand over the smooth wood. "I slept in it, and someday maybe our grandchildren will too." The baby came on a cold November night during the first snowstorm of the season. The labor was long and difficult, with Mrs. Matthews acting as midwife since the doctor couldn't make it through the snow. Olivia labored through the night, gripping Zachary's hand so hard she left bruises, while he whispered encouragements and wiped the sweat from her face. When their son finally entered the world just after dawn, his lusty cries filling the room, Olivia felt a love so overwhelming it brought fresh tears to her eyes. Zachary held the baby with hands that shook, staring down at the tiny face with an expression of wonder. "He's perfect," he breathed. "Absolutely perfect." They named him Thomas, after Zachary's father, and he became the center of their world. Zachary proved to be a devoted father, rising in the night to walk the floor with the baby when he fussed, changing dirty diapers without complaint, singing off-key lullabies that never failed to make Thomas stop crying. Olivia watched her husband with their son and fell in love with him all over again. When Thomas was 6 months old, Olivia discovered she was pregnant again. This pregnancy was easier, and their daughter Sarah was born on a warm June evening with far less drama than her brother. She came into the world with a full head of dark hair and her father's unusual eyes, and Zachary declared her the most beautiful baby ever born. The years flowed by, full and busy. Thomas grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who loved animals and spent hours following his father around the ranch. Sarah was wild and fearless, climbing trees and riding horses almost before she could walk properly. When Thomas was 4 and Sarah 2, Olivia gave birth to their third child, another son they named William after Olivia's father. The ranch prospered under Zachary's careful management. He bought the land to the north, expanding their grazing territory, and invested in better breeding stock that improved their herd. Olivia returned to teaching part-time once the children were older, and she successfully petitioned the town council to establish a lending library in a room above the general store. Life was not without challenges. They lost a quarter of their cattle one year to disease, and another year a late spring blizzard killed dozens of newborn calves. There were injuries, Zachary breaking his arm when a horse threw him, Olivia's close call with pneumonia one harsh winter, Thomas's terrifying fall from the barn loft that thankfully resulted in nothing worse than a broken collarbone. But they faced everything together, their love growing deeper and stronger with each passing season. On their 10th anniversary, Zachary surprised Olivia by hiring the ranch hands to watch the children so he could take her on a trip. They traveled to Missoula, staying in a real hotel with a dining room and everything. After dinner, they walked along the river, hand in hand under the stars. "You ever regret it?" Zachary asked. "Giving up your plans, staying here instead of going to Helena?" Olivia stopped walking and turned to face him. "Not for a single moment. That storm brought me exactly where I needed to be. Your mother was right, you know. Every storm does lead somewhere, and mine led me to you." He pulled her close, kissing her with the same passion he had shown on their wedding night. "I love you, Olivia Zimmerman, more now than I did the day I married you, and I'll love you more tomorrow than I do today." They returned home to chaos. Thomas had let the chickens out and couldn't get them back in. Sarah had climbed onto the roof and was refusing to come down, and William had spilled an entire jar of molasses on the kitchen floor. But Olivia wouldn't have traded it for anything. The children grew, as children do. Thomas became a fine horseman and showed real talent for working with cattle. He was patient and gentle, qualities that served him well when dealing with fractious animals. Sarah remained a whirlwind, but she had her father's head for figures and could calculate weights and measurements faster than anyone Olivia had ever seen. William developed a love of books that rivaled his mother's, spending hours in the library she had established, reading everything he could get his hands on. When Thomas turned 18, several local ranchers approached Zachary about buying him out, offering prices that would have made them wealthy enough to retire comfortably. But Zachary refused without hesitation. "This ranch is our legacy," he told them at dinner that night. "It's what your grandmother and grandfather built, what your mother and I have grown together. It's not just land and cattle. It's our family's story, and I want you three to continue that story when I'm gone." Thomas nodded seriously. "I'd like that, Pa, if you'll have me." "Have you?" "Son, there's nothing I want more than to work this land with you." Zachary's voice was rough with emotion. "You've got good instincts and a solid work ethic. Together we'll make this ranch better than ever." Sarah spoke up. "What about me and William? We love the ranch too." "Of course you do, and there's room for all of you if ranching is what you want." Zachary looked at Olivia, who nodded encouragingly. "But I also want you to know you've got choices. If Sarah wants to go to college and study mathematics, we'll find a way. If William wants to work in a library or become a teacher like his mother, that's fine too. The ranch will always be here, but I want you kids to follow your hearts." In the end, Thomas stayed on the ranch, eventually marrying a sweet girl from Wallace named Emma and building a house of his own on the northern section of the property. Sarah did go to college, becoming a teacher like her mother and eventually opening her own school in a growing town to the east. William apprenticed with a lawyer in Missoula and later returned to Wallace to open his own practice. Olivia and Zachary watched their children grow and thrive with pride, and sometimes bittersweet sadness at how quickly the years passed. But they still had each other, and if anything, their love deepened as they moved into their middle years. They had weathered storms together, both literal and figurative, and come through stronger. On a warm August evening, when they had been married 32 years, Olivia and Zachary sat on their porch watching the sunset paint the mountains purple and gold. Thomas was out checking the cattle with his own 2 sons, and the house was quiet. "You remember that storm?" Olivia asked, leaning against her husband. "The one that brought us together, every detail." Zachary's arm tightened around her. "I remember seeing you standing there in the rain, looking like a drowned kitten but trying to be brave about it. I remember thinking I'd never seen anyone more beautiful." "I was terrified," Olivia admitted. of the storm, of being alone, of what might happen. But then you appeared and said that thing about storms leading somewhere, and somehow I knew everything would be all right. It was fate." Zachary kissed the top of her head. "Had to be. What are the odds that I'd ride past your driver at exactly the right moment, that I'd find you in that storm, that you'd be brave enough to stay and give us a chance? Maybe it was fate, or maybe it was just a happy accident. Either way, I'm grateful." Olivia tilted her face up to kiss him properly. "You've given me a wonderful life, Zachary Zimmerman." "We've given each other a wonderful life," he corrected. "I was just existing before you came along. You taught me how to really live." They sat in comfortable silence as darkness fell and stars began appearing overhead. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called, and closer by, they could hear Thomas's boys laughing as they helped their father with the evening chores. The air smelled of grass and cattle and the distinctive scent of approaching autumn. "What are you thinking?" Zachary asked. "That I'm the luckiest woman alive." Olivia squeezed his hand. "And that I hope we have 32 more years together just like this. I'll do my best to arrange it." His voice was warm with amusement and love. "Though I've got to say, I'm looking forward to having more grandchildren to spoil. Thomas and Emma are working on number 3, and Sarah's been dropping hints about wanting to start a family soon. And William's been courting that nice girl from his office," Olivia added. "He brought her to dinner last week. I think she's the one." They talked about their children and grandchildren, about plans for the ranch and the town, about small things and large. The conversation flowed as easily as it had 32 years ago when they were just getting to know each other. That same sense of connection and understanding that had made Olivia stay all those years before. Eventually, they went inside, banking the fire and checking that the doors were locked, moving through the evening routine they had established over decades of marriage. In their bedroom, Zachary helped Olivia with the buttons on her dress as he had done thousands of times, and she helped him out of his boots, and they climbed into bed together, lying face to face in the darkness. "I love you," Zachary whispered, his fingers tracing the familiar contours of her face. "Every day, every moment, with everything I am. I love you too." Olivia pressed her forehead to his. "Thank you for finding me in that storm. Thank you for convincing me to stay. Thank you for this beautiful life. Thank you for saying yes." He kissed her softly. "To all of it." The years continued their steady march. Zachary and Olivia grew older, their hair turning gray, their movements slower but no less purposeful. The ranch remained strong under the combined efforts of Zachary, Thomas, and Thomas's sons, who showed every sign of continuing the family tradition. Sarah had 3 children of her own and visited regularly, bringing life and noise and laughter. William married his sweetheart and settled in Wallace, close enough to stop by for Sunday dinners. Olivia retired from teaching at 65, passing the school to a young woman who reminded her very much of herself at that age, eager and passionate and full of ideas. The library had grown over the years, now occupying its own small building and boasting a collection of over 1,000 books. Olivia spent her retirement volunteering there, recommending books and organizing reading clubs. On their 40th anniversary, their children and grandchildren threw them a party that seemed to include half of Wallace. People came from miles around to celebrate the couple who had become something of a legend in the area. The woman who had been stranded in a storm and the cowboy who had found her and fallen in love at first sight. "Speech!" Someone called out and the crowd took up the chant. "Speech! Speech!" Zachary stood, pulling Olivia up beside him. "I'm not much for speeches," he said, his voice carrying across the crowded room. "But I'll say this. 40 years ago, I found this woman standing in the worst storm I'd ever seen. She was cold and scared and miles from anywhere. I brought her home thinking I was rescuing her, but truth is, she rescued me. She brought light and love into my life and gave me a family and a reason to wake up smiling every morning. Every day with her has been a gift, and if I had it all to do over again, I wouldn't change a single thing. There wasn't a dry eye in the room when he finished. Olivia stood on her tiptoes to kiss him, not caring that everyone was watching, and the crowd erupted in cheers and applause. "Your turn," Zachary said, sitting back down and pulling her onto his lap like she was still the young woman he had courted all those years ago. Olivia looked out at the sea of faces, at her children and grandchildren, at the friends who had become family, at the husband who had kept every promise he had ever made to her. "All I can say is what Zachary's mother told him. Every storm leads somewhere. That storm led me to the love of my life, to this community, to a richness and fullness I never could have imagined. If I could go back and talk to that frightened girl standing by that broken stagecoach, I'd tell her not to worry. I'd tell her that the cowboy coming through the rain is going to change her life in the best possible way. I'd tell her that saying yes to staying will be the best decision she ever makes." The party continued late into the night, with music and dancing and storytelling. Olivia danced with Zachary, with her sons and grandsons, with old friends and new. Every time she looked at her husband, she found him watching her with that same expression he had worn the day they married, as if he couldn't quite believe his luck. They were 70 when Zachary had a minor heart episode that scared everyone badly. The doctor ordered him to slow down, to let Thomas and the boys handle more of the heavy work. Zachary grumbled about it but complied, and gradually adjusted to a less strenuous routine. He and Olivia spent more time together, taking slow walks around the ranch, sitting on the porch, working in the garden Olivia had cultivated over the years. "You know what I've been thinking," Zachary said one evening as they watched another Montana sunset. They never got tired of the view, even after more than 4 decades of seeing it. "What's that?" "That storm that brought you into my life. It happened on August 15th, 1886. That's next week, 44 years ago." He turned to look at her. "Want to take a ride out to where I found you? See if we can remember exactly where it was?" Olivia smiled. "I'd like that." The following week, they saddled 2 horses, Zachary insisting he was well enough to ride despite Olivia's concerns. Thomas wanted to come along, worried about his father, but Zachary waved him off. "I'm taking my wife on a romantic ride to where we met. The last thing we need is our son tagging along like a chaperone." But he said it with a smile, and Thomas backed down, making them promise to be back before dark. They rode slowly through the familiar landscape, Zachary leading them along paths he could have navigated blindfolded. Eventually, they came to a place where the road curved around a rocky outcrop, and Zachary reined in his horse. "I think it was here," he said, dismounting and helping Olivia down. "Yes, look. You can still see where the ruts from the stagecoach wheels dug deep into the mud." Olivia looked around, trying to overlay her memories of that terrifying night onto this peaceful afternoon scene. "It was so dark, and the rain was so heavy. I couldn't see anything. But I remember hearing your voice calling out and thinking it was the most wonderful sound I'd ever heard." "I almost didn't come," Zachary admitted. "Was thinking about just heading home and letting someone else check on you in the morning, but something kept pushing me forward, telling me I needed to be here. I'm glad you listened to that something." Olivia took his hand, lacing their fingers together. "Otherwise, who knows where I'd be now? Probably living with my aunt in Helena, teaching in some school there, never knowing what I was missing. Do you ever wonder what your life would have been like if you'd gone to Helena like you planned?" "Sometimes," Olivia said honestly. But I can't imagine it would have been better than this. Maybe it would have been fine, maybe even good. But it wouldn't have been you and me and the ranch and our children. It wouldn't have been this love. Zachary pulled her into his arms, holding her close. Every storm leads somewhere, he murmured into her hair. My mother was right about that, and ours led to 44 years of happiness. They stood there for a long time, wrapped in each other and their memories, before finally mounting their horses and riding home. Thomas was waiting on the porch, relief evident on his face when he saw them approaching. Thought you got lost, he called out. Just took our time, Zachary replied, dismounting and helping Olivia down. Your mother and I were reminiscing. That night in the privacy of their bedroom, Zachary held Olivia close. Promise me something, he said quietly. Anything. If something happens to me, if I go first, I want you to keep living. Really living, not just going through the motions. Find joy, spend time with the kids and grandkids, maybe even fall in love again if the right person comes along. Zachary, Olivia's voice broke. Don't talk like that. I need to say it. His arms tightened around her. I'm 70 years old and I've had one heart episode already. Odds are good I'll go before you, and I need to know you'll be all right. I could never love anyone else. Tears ran down Olivia's face. You're it for me. You always have been. Then promise me you'll keep living anyway. For me, if not for yourself. I can't bear the thought of you just fading away when I'm gone. All right. Olivia pressed her face against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. I promise. But you're not going anywhere for a long time yet. We're going to grow old together, remember. You promised me 32 more years on our 32nd anniversary. And I meant it. He kissed the top of her head. Plan on keeping that promise if I have anything to say about it. They had 5 more good years together. 5 years of watching grandchildren grow and great-grandchildren be born. 5 years of quiet contentment and deep happiness. Zachary's heart held steady, and though they both moved slower and tired more easily, they were still active and engaged with life. On a warm spring morning, Zachary kissed Olivia goodbye and rode out with Thomas to check on the cattle in the high pastures. They were gone most of the day, and when Thomas rode back alone leading his father's horse, Olivia knew before he even spoke what had happened. He's gone, Ma, Thomas said, his face streaked with tears. His heart just gave out while we were riding. He didn't suffer, didn't even have time to fall. I caught him and laid him down gentle, and he was smiling. Last thing he said was your name. The grief was crushing, a physical weight that made it hard to breathe. But Olivia held herself together through the funeral, through the seemingly endless stream of people who came to pay their respects to a man who had been a pillar of the community. Zachary was buried on a hillside overlooking the ranch, with a simple stone marker that read, Zachary Zimmerman, beloved husband, father, and grandfather. He found love in a storm and lived it every day. The weeks after the funeral were the hardest of Olivia's life. The house felt too big and too empty without Zachary's presence. She found herself listening for his footsteps, turning to tell him something before remembering he wasn't there. At night, she curled up on his side of the bed, breathing in the fading scent of him on the pillows. But she had made him a promise, and Olivia Lancaster Zimmerman had never broken a promise in her life. So she kept living. She spent time with her children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. She continued her work at the library. She tended her garden and took walks around the ranch and forced herself to find joy in the small things. A perfect sunset, a grandchild's laughter, the first flowers of spring. Thomas and his wife Emma wanted her to move in with them, but Olivia refused. This is my home, she told them gently. Mine and your father's. I'm not ready to leave it yet. On what would have been their 50th anniversary, Olivia rode out alone to the place where Zachary had found her all those years ago. She was 80 now, her body frail and her movements slow, but she managed the ride without difficulty. She stood at the spot, looking around at the landscape that had become as familiar to her as her own reflection. "I kept my promise," she said aloud, not caring if anyone heard her talking to empty air. "I'm still living, still finding reasons to smile, but I miss you, Zachary. Every single day I miss you." The wind picked up, rustling through the grass, and for just a moment Olivia could have sworn she heard his voice carried on it, saying what he had said that first night. "Every storm leads somewhere." She smiled through her tears. Yes, it did. Her storm had led her to a lifetime of love, to a family and a home and a community. It had led her to 50 years with the finest man she had ever known. And someday, when her own time came, she believed with everything in her that it would lead her back to him. Olivia lived another 8 years, remaining sharp and active well into her 80s. She saw 2 more great-grandchildren born and attended Sarah's daughter's wedding. She finally published the book she had been writing for years, a collection of stories about life in early Montana that became popular in schools throughout the territory. When she died peacefully in her sleep at 88, the entire community mourned. But they also celebrated a life well lived, a love story for the ages, a legacy that would continue through generations of Zimmermans who would work the land that Zachary and Olivia had loved so much. They buried her beside Zachary on that hillside overlooking the ranch. Thomas had her stone made to match his father's. Olivia Lancaster Zimmerman, beloved wife, mother, and grandmother, she found her home in a storm and made it paradise. The ranch continued to thrive under Thomas and his sons and eventually his grandsons. The house where Zachary and Olivia had lived and loved remained at the heart of the property, lovingly maintained as a reminder of where the family story truly began. And on quiet evenings, when the wind whispered through the grass and the sunset painted the mountains gold, it wasn't hard to imagine 2 figures sitting on that porch, hands intertwined, watching the stars come out together. The storm that had brought Olivia to Montana had indeed led somewhere, to a love that lasted a lifetime and beyond, to a family that carried that love forward through the generations, to a story that would be told and retold as long as the ranch remained standing. It was a testament to the truth of Zachary's mother's words, to the power of taking chances and following your heart, to the beautiful unpredictability of life. Every storm leads somewhere, and sometimes, if you're very lucky, it leads you exactly where you're meant to be. Years after both Zachary and Olivia had passed, their great-great-granddaughter stood at that same spot where the stagecoach had broken down over a century before. She was researching her family history, wanting to understand the roots that had made her family what they were. As she stood there imagining that stormy night, she understood something profound. Love wasn't just an emotion or a temporary feeling. It was a choice, a commitment, a legacy that rippled forward through time. Zachary had chosen to ride through a storm to help a stranger. Olivia had chosen to stay and see where that connection might lead. And from those choices had come everything. The thriving ranch, the family spread across Montana and beyond, the values and stories passed down through the generations. One storm, one chance meeting, one cowboy's conviction that storms lead somewhere, had created a foundation strong enough to last more than 100 years. She pulled out her phone and took a picture of the landscape, wanting to remember this moment, this place where her family's story truly began. Then she climbed back into her car and drove to the ranch, where the house still stood solid and strong, where family gathered every summer for reunions, where the story of Zachary and Olivia lived on in every board and beam and loving memory. The story of the stagecoach and the storm had become legend in the family, told to every new generation, a reminder that sometimes the worst moments in life lead to the best outcomes. That fear and uncertainty can transform into joy and love if you're brave enough to take the risk. That the right person will find you even in the darkest storm, and when they do, all you have to do is hold on and trust that everything will work out exactly as it should. In the family cemetery on the hillside, beneath the cottonwood trees that Zachary had planted when Thomas was born, two headstones stood side by side, their inscriptions worn smooth by wind and weather, but still readable. Flowers grew around them year-round, carefully tended by whoever was living in the main house, a small gesture of respect and remembrance for the couple who had started it all. And on stormy nights, when thunder rolled across the Montana plains and lightning split the sky, the current generation of Zimmermans would look out at the weather and think of Zachary riding through just such a storm to find Olivia. They would remember that every storm leads somewhere, and sometimes that somewhere is more beautiful than you ever dared to imagine. They would hold their own loved ones a little closer and feel grateful for the chain of love and choice and chance that had brought them to this moment, in this place, part of this family. The ranch continued, as Zachary had hoped it would, passing from father to son to grandson, adapting to changing times while maintaining the core values that Zachary and Olivia had established. The land was treated with respect, the cattle raised humanely, the community supported and embraced. It wasn't just a business but a way of life, a connection to history and family and the wild beauty of Montana that never faded no matter how much time passed. In the main house, Olivia's quilt still covered the bed in the master bedroom, its colors faded but its stitching strong. Zachary's hand-carved cradle still sat in the nursery, having rocked 6 generations of babies to sleep. The books from Olivia's library lined shelves throughout the house, their pages yellowed but their stories timeless. And on the mantel above the fireplace, in a place of honor, stood a photograph from Zachary and Olivia's 50th anniversary party, showing them looking at each other with expressions of such pure love that everyone who saw it felt moved. This was the legacy of one storm, one broken stagecoach wheel, one cowboy who believed storms led somewhere, and one woman brave enough to follow where that storm took her. It was a legacy of love and commitment, of hard work and dedication, of family and community and the enduring strength of human connection. And somewhere, in whatever lies beyond this life, Zachary and Olivia walked together still, hand in hand through fields of endless summer, never growing old, never growing tired, their love as strong and vital as it had been that first night when he carried her into his house, and she knew, even then, that she had found her home. The storm had led them to each other, and from that meeting had grown something beautiful and lasting, something that would continue on through all the generations to come. It was a reminder that life's hardest moments can be doorways to our greatest joys, that the universe has a way of putting people exactly where they need to be, and that true love, the kind that weathers every storm and grows stronger with each passing year, is worth any risk, any sacrifice, any leap of faith. Zachary had been right all those years ago. Every storm leads somewhere, and theirs had led to exactly where they were meant to be, together forever, in love without end.